today, Tommy. How are you?
I'm good. Hey, I'm glad that we're finally out of that lull. I can see the light at the end of the tunnel. Feel good about it. Ready to get going here on a Monday.
Yeah, it's a good time. I love this time of year. This time of year, though, is when I become the most impatient, I think, because I get so ready for the football season. I just can't wait for it. Talked to Phil Steele over the weekend on CBS Sports Radio. Can you bring a little insight to what he had to say about, the Big 12 portion of the college football season? I thought his thoughts were interesting there. But all kinds of good stuff for you, in that. And, we could, Jad, at some point think about, as we're just thinking out loud on the air, we could probably chop out a portion of that and play that for people later this week if we wanted to do that and get some thoughts on the college football season. Nothing in there that he said at this point is going to change. So it might be relevant for people to hear the man behind the great Preview magazine. So maybe we'll do that, Jad. Let's chop the ins and outs of that off, and we'll be able to play the meatiest portion of that for people at some point later today. We could do that, or we could do it tomorrow, but we'll get you that Phil Steele portion. I talked to Paul Mills over the weekend, Tommy. Thought it might be a good chance for him to, put himself out there to people across the country. Boy, he's focused in. He is locked into what they're trying to do right now. I couldn't get him to waver on anything, like to talk, big picture or what he thinks about XYZ. He's like, I'm thinking about how to get a guy into a defensive stance. And I believe him. I do believe him. And I'm really interested to see if that old school, just like real hands-on approach pays off for this new team. It's such an interesting year for them. And I cannot wait to see them, I guess in Greece, if we're able to see any of that, but just that's exciting. That's on the radar, but not before TBT. It's a great week. It's a week of anticipation. I don't know about you, Tommy. I am beginning the long process for me of getting ready for the fantasy football season. I do a lot of that. I try to really, lock in and make that a fun thing. It's probably my number one hobby. I always say that. So I'm beginning that process, which is really dorky. I get it. But, it's after July 4th, I sort of lock in for about a month and a half of getting ready for the fantasy football season.
I haven't done anything fantasy football related. I'm in fantasy baseball mode right now. We've got our trade deadline coming up here in my fantasy baseball league. I'm trying to crawl back into relevance. I had a really bad start to the season, and we've got 10 teams in our league. I'm up to, I think, 5th or 6th right now after this week. So I'm doing everything I can. I've got some players on the trade block. So I'm focused in on that. I probably won't really get into fantasy football until maybe the middle of August.
A couple of really cool guys here talking to you on the air that are, really trying to balance the commitment to fantasy baseball and fantasy football. I'm with you, Tommy. I'm actually in the league I've been in now for, I think, about 20 years, fantasy baseball. Been the same guys. I'm looking for a 4-peat, if you can believe that, this year,
wow.
which is just so stupid. And I have a good team, but there's a ton of injuries. We'll see if I can withstand it and go for that 4-peat. You can imagine the amount of trash I've been talking, so I really need to back that up. All right, so the big news over the weekend for us, as far as topics we've been sort of bridging this gap with, DeAndre Hopkins. We began the process of saying, okay, I think there's a chance. I think there'd be mutual interest. I went as far as just to feel it. I just feel like he's going to go to the Chiefs. Then we sort of went cold on that for a while. And then nothing happens. And then you start to see some little rumblings. And, the Chris Jones deal still isn't done, by the way. But DeAndre Hopkins ends up over the weekend signing with the Titans, who have, by all accounts, been the most aggressive suitor of him. And when you see the deal, that's the thing. It's done. Like, the Chiefs weren't going to go there. And that's why he's a Titan, and, good for them and good for him for doing it. But a 2-year, $26 million deal is almost 2 times what I thought the Chiefs would ultimately offer him, Tommy. So this makes sense. The Titans probably thought the same thing we did, and they stepped in and they said, here's an offer that you can't refuse. Up to $32 million with incentives, which he has a great opportunity to reach there. But that's a lot of money. That is a lot of money for D-Hop, for a team that is seemingly in a rebuild. And, I can't blame Hopkins for that, right? Because with the Chiefs, it was, I think, at most going to be the 1 year and $15 million that Odell Beckham Jr.'s side, right? Like that was going to be what they offered. And probably for a long time, that was great for D-Hop because that's probably what everybody was offering. And it's like, okay, well, if I have my choice, but then the Titans essentially come in and double that. I mean, it's a no-brainer for Hopkins at that point.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a no-brainer for Hopkins, and I think a little bit surprising for the Titans that they want to do that.
A little bit.
And it is really incentive laden. So the only way that he's able to get that full amount is if he hits certain incentive peaks and performances throughout the season. So I understand that, but the other thing to keep in mind that I didn't really think about until last night, I was just kind of laying in bed and thinking about the D-Hop deal, and all of a sudden it hit me. I was like, the Titans had AJ Brown and they could have extended him and they didn't. And now they're paying quite a bit of money for DeAndre Hopkins. And, of course, Hopkins is a 3-time All-Pro. I get all that, but AJ Brown's one of the best receivers in the nation. And I don't know. It's going to be interesting for me to watch how D-Hop does at the age of 31 in Tennessee. And then ultimately, how does that compare with what could have been with AJ Brown with Tennessee? So, I mean, I understand the Titans were in a position where they really, really needed a number one playmaker receiver, and DeAndre Hopkins, obviously is a future Hall of Famer. So, that I get all of that. I do think they overpaid for a receiver on the wrong end of 30 who's battled some injuries. But I get it. They were kind of in a desperate position. They needed a star receiver.
I don't even know that it's desperate. Here's what I respect out of the Titans. And man, I think like sometimes I wonder like who would be the fun teams to be a fan of, right? Obviously the Chiefs are in that, but the Titans would be a great team to be a fan of because they do not mail it in. Like Mike Vrabel, I think, is one of the best in the business right now. And they just are not going to be content with, oh, well, this is just a rebuilding year. And quite frankly, they shouldn't be, right? Because they're in a winnable division. Like Derrick Henry's still there. I think they feel pretty good about their line. They invested in Treylon Burks last year. They add DeAndre Hopkins there. Ryan Tannehill is still the quarterback in Tennessee. Yeah. Okay, so we know that their defense is going to bring it under Vrabel, whether they have to retool talent or not. Like the Titans are in a position to win that division. I think there's a big difference in the Tennessee Titans and the Arizona Cardinals, right? Like, let's not pretend like the Titans are some awful team that D-Hop, he doesn't care about winning. Like he won't, he went to the Titans. Like the Titans could win their division.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. And let me look at the competition in that division, right? I mean, Trevor Lawrence and Doug Peterson with the Jaguars, they're on the come up. And I would imagine they're still the betting favorite to win that division, but it's probably not by a whole lot, with the Titans right behind them. I think the Colts are a ways away with Anthony Richardson. That's going to take some time. And the Texans with CJ Stroud, that's going to take some time also. So I get it. I get why they wanted to reload. But you know what? History with Tennessee tells you that when they go out and they acquire a veteran wide receiver, it doesn't work out. Remember, they brought in Julio Jones. Didn't really work out. Randy Moss was a Titan. That didn't really work out. Andre Johnson was a Titan. That didn't really work out. So there are countless examples of wide receivers who were, by all accounts, fantastic in the National Football League, signing a deal with the Tennessee Titans on the downward slide of their career and really not being able to produce.
It is, but we can look at that historic nature of what the Titans do, but that's so hard in the NFL. Like I know we like those trends, but man, every situation's different, right? Like every player's different. If the Titans, who I do agree should try to win the division because I think that they can, right? Jacksonville's a great story. Jacksonville's going to be the favorite. I don't question that at all. But that doesn't mean they're like, what's the difference in Jacksonville and Tennessee? I don't think it's that much because we've seen Tannehill lead this team to some really great years, right? And we've seen Mike Vrabel basically win always. So you had Treylon Burks that you invested in. By the way, I think this probably helps Treylon Burks develop. And so now you've got a nice wide receiver room. They've got a few other guys that are pretty good too in that in that group. You've still got Derrick Henry. I mean, is Jacksonville that much better than Tennessee? Because I think Tennessee's for sure better than Indianapolis and for sure better than Houston.
Sure. And I think that with that acquisition, they've certainly narrowed that gap, if there was one, between the Titans and the Jags. That's going to be an incredibly intriguing division to watch because it is winnable. That is a winnable division. You don't have, I mean, think of the teams in the other divisions in the AFC that you would consider betting favorites, right? And there's one like dominant in each of the other divisions in the AFC. Kansas City in the West, Cincinnati in the North, and Buffalo and maybe the Jets in the East, right? Like the South is wide, I don't want to say wide open, but it's fairly open. I don't think that you could put the Jaguars anywhere close to the same category as those teams I just mentioned. And so by acquiring DeAndre Hopkins, that makes the Titans, I think it closes that gap a little bit, or maybe even a lot between them and the Jags. It's certainly a winnable division for them. And keep in mind, don't forget, don't forget their defense is probably the most underrated in the league under Mike Vrabel. And, they consistently year in and year out, they get after it defensively. And so I think that that's got to be taken into consideration as well. Man, with that acquisition, even though I have doubts that DeAndre Hopkins can be an all-pro like he was at his previous stops with the Titans, sure, he's incredibly talented still. And if he can stay healthy and he's durable for the 2 years that he's under contract for the Titans, then that can end up being a really good acquisition for them. Just the examples in the past haven't always panned out for Tennessee when they sign veteran receivers.
Yeah, I mean, the Titans had a middle-of-the-road defense last year by most metrics, which they, I'm just going to count on their defense being respectable, if not getting better under Vrabel. But let's think about it this way. Just in the AFC, was there a team on the open market, right, with more to gain, with more difference to make up through a signing like that than Tennessee? Probably not. Like the Chiefs are already the Super Bowl favorite. They would have been an overwhelming favorite, I think, had D-Hop gone there. But within each division, I think if there was a team that was going to make a move to catch the division leader, try to follow this, if this makes any sense. And the smallest gap, I think, too, right? As far as like how winnable is our division? I think that the Titans catching the Jaguars is maybe not, it's certainly as likely as somebody catching Cincinnati, only because I think that division's really, really good, top to bottom. Certainly Buffalo, again, with Miami and the Jets, both really good. New England, even with D-Hop, wasn't going to catch those three, right? You might be able to say the Chiefs are that much of a favorite over the Chargers to win the division. And I think, on paper, that's probably not true, but history tells us that it is, right? But the gap between the Jags and the Titans was the smallest to me. So if you're looking at like what team had the most to gain by signing him, you can easily make that case for Tennessee. Now, in the NFC, it's a little bit different. There are probably a lot of teams in some of those bad NFC divisions that could have made that case, right? But in the AFC, it makes so much sense for the Titans to go big there. 2 years and $30 million essentially through incentives is way more, I'm convinced, than anybody else was going to offer Hopkins this year. I think it's 2 times more than what the Chiefs would have offered. So you want to talk about being aggressive in that. That's what they were. They really think he can help them clearly. And, what's the window for them? I think they have a reasonable 2-year window, right? Like I know they drafted, Levis and they drafted Malik Willis last year. And, I'm not very confident that either one of those guys are going to be the quarterback of the future for them. But Ryan Tannehill's still there now. And you could probably talk Ryan Tannehill
quarterback.
Yeah, you can talk him into one more year, I would imagine, after this. Now, he's older than you realize. I think he's like 38. Don't quote me on that. He's older than we think he is. He's pretty old for NFL quarterback. But I think if you want to continue with Derrick Henry and you want to run this back, how old is he?
34.
34. Okay.
He'll be 35. He'll be 35 in a couple weeks.
He'll be a 35-year-old quarterback this year, which is old for most people, not named like Tom Brady, Aaron Rodgers, whatever. I think that they can absolutely make a case to make 2 more runs at this. They totally can, right? And whether it's Tannehill or somebody else, like there's enough there. They just don't seem like a team to me that's going to be picking at the top of any draft anytime soon. I don't think that's how they're wired. I don't think that's I know that's not how Mike Vrabel's wired. And that's why I say it's, good on that organization for doing that and taking that risk. It was going to be, icing on the cake for the Chiefs. But for the Titans, it was a far more valuable move, and that explains their aggression in the deal that they made. I totally get it. And it may not work. Look, this could be a disaster, but what's the risk of the disaster? Because that's probably your window anyway if you're Tennessee, reasonably. It's
outside
it's
of
sort of the Derrick Henry window.
right.
Like,
outside of the money that you're willing to spend him, I mean, that would spend on him. That would be the only risk that I can perceive with this signing. And looking at updated odds this morning, really, I think it's a testament to how strong the sports books think the AFC is, because it didn't really move the needle all that much for the Titans and overall odds. Like to win the conference, they're still 55-1, and they're still third to last to win that conference, right in front of the Colts and the Texans. And then from there, I mean, like, the Jags are up there at 12-1. Obviously, the Chiefs are the betting favorite to win the AFC, but they're still long shots in the conference and in the division. I mean, the Jags are still the betting favorites in the AFC South at -155. The Titans are plus 350 in second place. I mean, I like that value right there.
I do
plus
too.
350 to grab them to win that division. I'm not sure that they're at a point right now with Ryan Tannehill to go deep in the playoffs, or I don't want to say that I would think that they would, win the conference by any stretch of the imagination, but to win that division over the Jags, I think it's conceivable that if Trevor Lawrence doesn't take them to another division championship this season. So I like that value at plus 350.
It's a Trevor Lawrence question. Let's not forget they added Calvin Ridley. Right? Like if Calvin Ridley's healthy, which he's not right now, he hadn't played football in a while. It's their division to lose, but that's a Trevor Lawrence thing. But like, how much are you really willing to bet? Because if Tennessee gets, back to its defensive prowess, which is, I think, a decent chance, again, like when you're playing football and a team can play defense and run Derrick Henry at you that way, and they just added somebody like DeAndre Hopkins as a threat, I'm not comfortable with that bet. Like I'm not going to run out there to bet the Jags to win the division. I think that they will, but man, I don't think it's that. We'll see. I mean, it's a Trevor Lawrence question. If he continues his development, takes another big step forward, then this is a non-starter. They'll beat the Titans twice and it won't matter. But I like the move for the Titans. I thought it was going to be the Chiefs. I still think that might have been the case. Here's what I would guess happened. They were waiting on Chris Jones, and DeAndre Hopkins probably had an offer and thought, based on reality, he could get a similar offer from the Chiefs, and the Titans came in and they said, well, no, let's make this happen. How about we, essentially double your money? And he was like, okay, fine. That would be what I guess happened, and good for them for doing it, but he's not a Chief. Speaking of the Chiefs, quarterback, the new big hit on Netflix. Are you watching it? I made it one episode in. Not what I thought it was going to be at all. So we'll talk about that. I don't know how much Tommy's been able to dive in yet. I know a lot of people are watching it because a lot of people were talking to me about it over the weekend. And I was like, all right, I better get in on this right now because we're going to need to talk about this on the show. 869-1240 is the number to call here on Sports Daily. Look, we got triple-digit heat indexes the next 3 days. I just brought Jad over the weekend a big old fresh fat stack of free iced tea cards to HTO. Let's give away a couple of those now, Jad. These will work east or west. 13th and Tyler West, 21st and 127th East. You get a couple of iced teas if you're a fan. If you haven't tried it, well, you'll enjoy it. But first caller during the break here, Jad will get us a winner. 869-1240, the IHOP hotline open. We'll be back with more Sports Daily right after this. All right, welcome back, everybody. Sports Daily here on a Monday edition. Congratulations to Tom for taking some HTO. It's going to be a hot one early this week. Hopefully that helps you cool off. Tom will give more of those away throughout the week here on Sports Daily. Glad to do it for you. All right, let's continue here with some football talk, Tommy. By the way, thanks to everybody for tuning in to our stream here, our video stream. We know you listen to us on KFH. If you're not in your car, you can always catch us on this video stream. Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, all have it. You can also listen for free on the Odyssey app. I appreciate everybody for every way they take us in. The quarterback documentary, Tommy, I'm not kidding. I bet 4 different people that I ran into asked about it this weekend. Oh, you watching the quarterback show on Netflix? And I'm like, oh, not yet. I heard it's good. Like, it's good. I like you, my wife became interested as she learned more about the behind the scenes and the Mahomes wife and family life thing. So here's what I thought we were about to watch. I thought we were going to turn it on, and here's this show about quarterbacks, and each week they're going to follow a different quarterback. And we're going to watch the Mahomes episode, and it's going to be like an hour, and that's what we'll do tonight. And it starts and it opens with a Kirk Cousins scene. And I was like, oh, they must have had Kirk Cousins must have been the first one. Let me go back. We went into the wrong one. And that's the point I realized, like, oh, no, this is like a 9-episode thing. Yeah. And they go all of them all the way through. This is a much bigger commitment than I anticipated it to be. So then we watched the first one, and I just kept saying to her, I was like, Michelle, this is going to be really good. I don't know how they picked 3 really interesting quarterbacks in really interesting situations, in different situations last year, but they got it right because this is going to be really good. And it was the first episode, which is all we were able to watch so far. And we'll probably try to watch like 2-3 times this week. So it'll take us a little more time, I think, than most to get through something like this. But I'm in. I think it's going to be fantastic.
Yeah, my days of binge watching shows, I think, are over, unfortunately. I used to love doing that, but, with kids and responsibilities makes it tough to do that. But we are 4 episodes in. We started it, I think, on Friday, watched a couple episodes, watched a couple more yesterday. And so we're, I think, almost halfway or right around halfway through. And it's great. I love it. And honestly, as much as I love Patrick Mahomes, I love the Kirk Cousins story. Like, that's the one that is my favorite because I relate so much to Kirk Cousins. Like, he's a dorky dad and I'm a dorky dad. And there were multiple times my wife would look over at me and be like, that is you. Like, what Kirk Cousins is talking about right now, that's you. And I'm like, well, I mean, obviously I'm not an NFL quarterback. So that's where the similarities stop. But other than that, I mean, like the yellow plaid shirt at the press conference and, his wife picking out his clothes and all of that. Like, I own all of that about my life. So there's a lot that I relate to. I relate far more to Kirk Cousins than I do Patrick Mahomes. That's for sure.
I will say that I relate some to Patrick Mahomes because he's from Texas, and like a lot of his personality reminds me of being from Texas. So like I have that in common with Mahomes, but yeah, that's about it. Kirk Cousins, so my wife was like, oh my God, he's such a dork. And I'm like in my head looking at her like, all right,
really?
Like, because that's like that's what you married, sweetie. Like he is like the Phil Dunphy, right, of the NFL, apparently, which we're all that's us, man. Like, that's what we all like strive to be, not on purpose. It just sort of happens on its own, right? It's just like the natural progression of things for most of us. But I'm sitting there hearing her say that, knowing, Kirk Cousins and all the fun and interesting things that happened to him last year. And I'm like, I just said, you're going to love where this goes. You're going to love where this goes. Not because of winning or losing, but, the chains and like the airplanes and all that stuff. And I haven't gotten that far. I don't know how quickly that gets to that in this series, but I'm like, God, how perfect was all of that? You're going to think this is awesome. And you're going to even think he's dorkier, which makes you uncomfortable, which makes me really, really happy. Cause it's like you just feed the brain of like, how can I embarrass my wife? Well, let me take a few pointers here from Kirk Cousins on how to do that. Although his wife seems to be a little more like embracing of the dork role. She seems to like embrace it and feed it, whereas I try to do it to embarrass everybody else in my house.
Yeah, that's kind of the way that I saw it too. Because my wife, I think if you were to ask her who she relates to the most, it's probably Brittany Mahomes. and it's not Kirk Cousins' wife. So it's kind of like if you had Kirk Cousins marry Brittany Mahomes, that's kind of like my marriage, like with my wife.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I
Yeah.
think we're probably in a similar situation. My wife's a little rowdier, a little feistier than Kirk Cousins' wife, for sure.
Yep. And
The Marcus
sadly,
Mariota
I was going to say,
angle.
I don't love the Marcus Mariota
Well,
angle.
I haven't seen enough of it, and but I'll tell you why I do, because I think he's been a really interesting NFL player who's been more successful probably than you remember, who's one of the great athletes to ever play the position and a world-class person by all accounts. I've had one interaction of that to speak to just how good of a person he is. So I'm gotten close with a family over the year who lost a young son in a battle with cancer, and we did a lot of stories. Love that family, love that kid. And, one of the cool things we did was we went to a Chiefs game, but there was a connection between some people and Marcus Mariota, somebody that went to Oregon with him. And man, on a road game, on a road trip to Kansas City to Arrowhead when he was with the Titans, he took time out to come meet this kid and like hang with him for a little bit. And that is not easy to do. Like, these guys aren't in town very long when they're in town. Like, they come in, it's all business, it's rigid time, it's all this stuff. Took that time, total stranger, very cool. And I heard from the people that knew him just like how great a person he was. So like, I've always rooted for Marcus Mariota since that. And so I was happy for him that he got the Atlanta job for just a little bit. Now I know how that ends. That's the interesting thing about this documentary is we know the ending. We just don't know the behind the scenes. But like for my wife, she doesn't know the ending. She doesn't know anything about the Atlanta Falcons last year. So this is going to be like an actual journey, like through what happened last year with the Falcons. That's going to be pretty compelling television when it gets to that point, right? And so it's interesting. The one thing and I know Peyton Manning's the executive producer, which I didn't know before last night. This is going to take what's already the most fascinating and popular thing in sports, at least in American sports, which is the NFL quarterback, and it is going to amplify it 1,000 times. And people are going to quickly understand how and why players that were great in college don't come to the NFL and just be great, right? You can be great in high school and great in college, and then you get to the NFL, and this show is going to show us why. Like, boy, it is the hardest thing to do in sports.
Yeah. And when I say I don't love the Marcus Mariota storyline, it's just because as of right now, through the first 4 episodes, it's probably the least compelling out of the 3. And I know, obviously, as you mentioned, as we get further into the season, things start to percolate a little bit more because we know what happens with Marcus Mariota and all of that. But to your point, it's the behind the scenes look in sports, like that's really become, I mean, it's always been there to an extent. You've had documentaries and 30 for 30s and things like that. But like, I equate this to the Full Swing golf documentary on Netflix that came out a few months ago, when you're really getting the behind the scenes look on what's going on with these guys while they're playing golf. Kind of the same thing with quarterback right now. And I think this is just going to continue, in a lot of different ways, a lot of different forms, a lot of different sports. It makes a lot of sense. But yeah, to your point, there's an episode, I won't spoil it for you, but there's an episode coming up where it really dives into the mental aspect of being a quarterback and the learning the plays and being in a new system. And like, it starts off with these guys like reading off all these different, names of plays. And my wife looked at me and she's like, holy cow. Like, I did not realize the way that these, plays are. It's like they're speaking a different language, and so it's so difficult. And it's not just the physical toll, it's the mental toll and the learning and the studying and all of that goes into it. It's fascinating stuff. And I think it to your point, it gives you a better understanding of why that position is so not only important, but so difficult.
It is insane. Like, it's an absolute insanity. The other thing that stood out to me in the first episode was hearing the plays that you miss stick far more than the plays that you hit. Now, I don't think that's so I don't think that that's so unusual for any of us in life. What we miss out on sometimes we hang on to more than what we don't. And I know that's not healthy, right? Like I don't there's no doubt about it. Like if you've had any life experience, you know that, philosophers and, t-shirt makers and everybody else and, kitten signs, kitten poster makers have told you, like, don't focus on the bad, focus on the good, basically, which is a healthy thing to do. But man, with people wired like that, it just amplifies it and you can see it. And like, you can, I don't know, like, again, Peyton Manning be attached to this probably helped, but the amount of access clearly that these crews have gotten just in game, like not off the field, but in the game. And I know NFL Films has a lot of that stuff, so maybe it wasn't that hard, but to get that in on Mahomes Crosby in that game.
Yeah.
Oh, so good. Yep. It is so good. Yeah.
And what I love is how individualized it is. Like, okay, so we follow the Chiefs here pretty closely, right? And it's football is a team sport. We all know that. This is 100% purely Patrick Mahomes. Like I've watched 4 episodes. It's not like they're doing interviews with Travis Kelce, and Travis Kelce's a big personality.
Yeah.
He's not a part of it. Like this is Patrick Mahomes. This is Kirk Cousins. This is not the Chiefs. This is not the Vikings. This show is 100% into them. And so that's what I like so much about it, because you're hearing directly from them about their mindset, their preparation, their struggles, what makes them tick, things that Mahomes is saying, like, times I don't even know what I'm doing. I just go out there and go crazy. And when I watch film, I watch it back and I'm like, holy cow, how did I do that? Like this individualized look at what is a huge team sport. I think that's what makes it so compelling.
I love the trash talk. I love, the Mahomes Crosby thing to me was the best thing about the whole episode. Just like that little slight insight into a game was the best part. It was awesome. The other thing that we talked about, like relating, here's where else I absolutely relate with Patrick Mahomes. When his wife was making him take a bunch of pictures,
100%,
and his utter annoyance with it.
Yep.
And when he was outside screaming at the dogs. I can't tell you how many times I get shushed. It happened several times this weekend when we're in public and I'm yelling at the kids or something, where I get shushed, like everybody's looking at you. I'm like, well, tell my son not to hit me in the nuts when I'm sitting here. Right. Then like, that's going to make me yell at him. Like whatever it is, like that's it's good stuff. Yeah. And it is relatable.
Line,
like,
sure. The line that Mahomes said when in the whole taking pictures thing, when he goes, surely there's a good one in there somewhere. Like, I think I've said that word for word hundreds of times to my wife. Surely there's a good one in there somewhere. We don't need to take any more. We're good. Let's move on.
Yeah. Yeah. It's not going to change. Like nothing's going to change. We're getting old. There's no angle that's going to make us not look like we're getting old.
Yep.
We are. So let's get over it. David chimes in on the video stream and he says he loves the show, but Full Swing was very good. Is that the golf one?
That's the golf one. Drive to Survive is the F1 series that I've heard is phenomenal, and I've not watched it, but I've heard it's great.
Yeah, I haven't either, but I have also heard that it's really cool and it'll make you like the drivers. All right, 869-1240, IHOP hotline's open. So we'll sort of walk through that with you. And it's not like there's spoilers in there because, again, we all know how seasons ended last year. But we won't give away a ton of what's in the episodes other than what we just did, which I think is safe and whatever. But we'll try and give like spoiler alert things when we do that. All right, 869-1240 is the hotline number. Let's come back. We'll talk a little more football when we return. I want to talk some baseball today because it was really interesting weekend, I think, for the Royals. At least it was to me. So we'll get into that a little bit on a couple of different angles. 869-1240. We'll be right back with more Sports Day. All right, everybody. Welcome back to Sports Daily. Let's go to that IHOP hotline. Charlie wants to weigh in on the quarterbacks documentary conversation. What's up, Charlie?
Good morning, Jacob and Tommy. How you guys doing this beautiful Monday morning?
Doing great.
Pretty good.
Good. Hey, my wife and I and son watched that quarterback documentary, and it was really good. It was really in-depth, and we really enjoyed it a lot.
Are you all the way through it, Charlie?
Yes, we've already been through the whole thing, so I'm not going to say anything because for those who haven't seen it, don't want to spoil anything. But yeah, it was really good, very well thought out.
Okay, well, we appreciate that. So we can expect the same level of enjoyment as we've enjoyed through the first part of it. Then.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
All right.
Hey, Jacob, like you were saying earlier, when people go from like high school to college, you need to be an outstanding baseball, basketball, football player in high school. Then you might be an outstanding football player in college, basketball, baseball. But when you get to the pros, it's a whole new ballgame, brother. Those guys are bigger, faster, and meaner. And, it's a whole new ballgame.
Well, and I think, too, like it amplifies at that position because I do think in general terms, baseball is the hardest sport to translate for sure. Basketball, like stars are generally okay. And even in the NFL, like if you're a great offensive lineman in college, there's a pretty good chance you're going to be a good offensive lineman in the pros.
Right.
But at quarterback, it's why there's so many swings and misses. Like the cerebral part of it, I don't know how you're supposed to get a good understanding of that because nobody is going to demand that of the quarterback in college. You just don't need to. That's the part. Like, I don't know how you ever predict that if you're an NFL evaluator.
Well, see, that's one thing about Patrick Mahomes. When he went to the NFL Combine, a lot of the sports analysts and guys that were analyzing him, he said he's too slow. His feet work is horrible. He keeps overshooting the receivers. And then they thought Kansas City wasted a good draft choice on him. Well, I think somebody forgot to translate that to Patrick Mahomes because he's taken them to 5 AFC title games, and he's also won 2 Super Bowls out of that before they went to.
But he'll remember the two
good.
Super Bowl losses more than he'll remember the wins. All right, Charlie, appreciate the call. Thanks, and we'll look forward to the rest of the series, especially with your, confirmation that it stays pretty good. Appreciate that. The IHOP hotline is open 869-1240. It's pretty fascinating to get an understanding. And you know who else I thought so far has come out through one episode, right? Just one episode, is Kevin Connolly. So Kevin
O'Connell.
Kevin Connolly. Isn't Kevin Connolly an actor? Yeah, Kevin O'Connell. Kevin O'Connell this is what's interesting. So my wife went to San Diego State, which we've talked about. Kevin O'Connell was the quarterback for the Aztecs while she was there. And she was like, yeah, I didn't know that. We didn't really watch the because they played at Qualcomm at the time. She was like, it's kind of hard to get there. They weren't that good. But what was even more interesting is he went to a high school in my wife's hometown. So she was like, oh yeah, I'm pretty sure that, I dated a guy that was friends with him, and, and I'm trying to think, like, how well do you know Kevin O'Connell, right? Like,
right.
What are we talking about here? And then I think I made the comment, well, at least he's balding, right? Because I thought he's looked awesome. Like, he is.
Yeah. And
he's looked really smart. He's looked really cool. His communication skills are fan-dang-tastic. Like, I think he's going to be a good coach.
I looked him up because I knew that he had been a coach in the NFL for a few years, and obviously the name was familiar and all of that, and was a backup quarterback for a couple of years in the league. And then when they showed him on camera, I was like, oh, that guy's got to be like in his mid 40s, or even older than that. No, he's our age. Like, he's right, like literally our age. And I'm like, man, either he's not aging well, or I look like that too, and I don't realize it.
Yeah, no, he's going to come out of this thing. People are going to fall in love with him. I've only seen one episode, but I'm in on him the way he communicates, right? Like now, like I am in on that.
It only gets better.
I've told you this before. I'm going to bet the Vikings to win that division. I don't care what anybody says this year.
They're plus money too. I just looked at that this morning. Like the Lions are the odds-on favorites.
And that was before I watched any of this. It's because I just don't think Detroit's made that much of a leap, and I'm not that in on Jordan Love yet. Why is everybody so down on the Vikings? I can't figure it out. Like, even if it's the same thing it's always been, there was a point last year where they had more wins than anybody.
No Dalvin Cook, maybe. I mean, that might be the only thing I can think of.
Yeah, but he wasn't a huge factor last year. Okay. When we come back, we are going to play. We're going to play that Phil Steele interview when we come back. College football preview. We're getting closer to that too. It was a good opportunity to talk to him about a lot of different things. I talked quite a bit about the Big 12, and then we sort of took a broader look. So figured that would be a good thing for the folks here to listen to. That was from this weekend on CBS Sports Radio. We'll do that when we return. We'll have that. We'll also talk some Royals baseball. I think it's been an interesting weekend for them. It's all coming up on Sports Daily. Albracht and Castor here on this Monday edition, ramping up into the best time of the sports year. We're getting closer, everybody. A couple weeks away from starting to really lock into the NFL season, to college football season. We got the TBT, of course, coming up later this week. It's all coming for you. Sports Daily, hour number 2, right after this.
This is Sports Daily on Wichita's #1 sports radio, 97.5 and 1240 KFH.
Okay, everybody. Welcome back. Hour number 2. We're going to get this hour going. So here's how the weekend went. So Phil Steele was able to get an interview with Phil Steele, who, for college football people, he puts together a great preview magazine. But the reason I always like Phil Steele is because he talks to all the coaches, like almost all of them, as a part of his process to put this thing together. And I've known this because I've talked to him in the past at some point. I don't even remember when. Like, he's an encyclopedia on this stuff. Like, the recall is instant, so you can ask him anything. So I wanted to get with him as we did the CBS Sports Radio shift nationally. Well, here locally, because the Royals were rescheduled, a doubleheader covered up the interview for the folks here in Wichita. So I thought, well, you know what? Let's get that for people here, because we did talk, about the Big 12 and everything else as a part of our more broad conversation. So we're going to play that for you here to open things in hour number 2. We'll get to that segment, Tommy. I think, he's as good at this point in the season. He's as good as there is. It's sort of taking a look at things.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to hearing it. I didn't get a chance to catch it this weekend, so looking forward to hearing that.
All right, so we'll have that for you right here. We'll come back after the interview. We'll set it up, and then we'll go Royals to wrap up the rest of hour number 2. So here you go, Phil Steele from CBS Sports Radio with me here. This was on Saturday.
Joining us on the hotline right now, the legend himself, college football royalty, Phil Steele. You've seen his magazine. I know you have. Phil, we really appreciate you stopping in to talk a little college football before, what are we now? About a month away from go time here before we get into practice and really going on this?
Yeah, they start at the August 1st starts practices for the teams, and I think the first game is in about 40 days, Jacob. So we're not too far away. Everybody's going to be gearing up for it. Summer vacation's going to be over for these coaches.
It's a wild time in college football. The game has changed. I just wonder, before we get into the specifics, as you've been doing your college football preview, for a long time, in the current landscape with all the realignment and the NIL deals, do you find it any different, any more or less enjoyable to cover this sport the way you have forever?
Well, it's a lot more frantic in the final weeks of the magazine process, Jacob, and the fact that this transfer portal. And the good news is this past year, they closed the portal on May 15th. So whereas in, maybe 10, 15 years ago, I was able to send a magazine to the press in May and know I have all the rosters complete and up to date. This year, I had to send it to the press on June 7th because what I did is I waited till the transfer portal closed. Then I gave it about 3 weeks after the portal closed to capture where everybody was going. I think we've captured about 99% of the moves. So we come out later than everybody else does, football magazine-wise. And I'll tell you what, I talked to 122 of the 133 head coaches this year. Each of them has my cell phone number. I told them, text me, call me if you get anybody in last minute. And we were getting on June 6th, I was getting texts. Hey, we signed this guy. Hey, we signed this guy. So we're adding them to the pages frantically in the last minutes of it. So that's probably been the biggest change has been the transfer portal.
As you look at the landscape, let's go, big picture here to start things off, talking with Phil Steele, of course, legendary magazine that we all take a peek at as we get ready for the college football season. The SEC's king. Again, where do you think the next best brand of football will be played this year? What conference do you think will have just, sort of top to bottom, that league maybe that people aren't expecting? Is it the Big Ten, naturally because there are so many teams, or maybe somebody else that you're expecting to step up and surprise us this year outside the SEC?
Yeah, I think the big two conferences are the SEC and the Big Ten. And when you look at the Big Ten, you go to the East. They've got three teams that rank in my top 5 of the power poll in Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State, all worthy of being national title contenders. And out of the West, Wisconsin and Iowa. But if you're looking for a conference other than the two big boys, I'm going to say the Pac-12 this year. And they are just absolutely loaded, Jacob, at the quarterback position. You know, they've got the Heisman winner in Caleb Williams. You've got Cam Rising from Utah. You've got Bo Nix coming back from Oregon. You got Michael Penix, who threw for over 4,000 yards at Washington last year. You know, it is just Washington State's got Cam Ward coming back. So it's a loaded quarterback conference. I think the Pac-12, which has had trouble qualifying for the playoffs because they beat each other up, that might happen again this year. All the big boys are playing each other. And so, you know, even USC's got to play at Oregon, at Notre Dame. Everybody's got a couple of tough road tests. You might not see the Pac-12 in the playoff this year because they beat each other up. But to me, it's clearly going to be a highly competitive conference and loaded with quality teams.
Let's look at the Pac-12 for just a second then. USC, I keep seeing, you know, a lot of pressure, a lot of, you know, Lincoln Riley there now with Caleb Williams. Are they good enough to make a run in this? We know they have a great quarterback. We know, you know, the offense is probably going to be pretty good, but top to bottom, is that a team that could contend for a national title this year?
Yeah, I think so. And the key is going to be the defense. And going over the squad with Lincoln Riley, he addressed the defense wholeheartedly. I mean, he brought in Bear Alexander from Georgia, who was my number 6 rated defensive lineman out of high school, 6'3", 315. He brought in Anthony Lucas from Texas A&M, who was my number 8 rated defensive lineman out of high school. He brought in Mason Cobb, who had 90 some odd tackles at Oklahoma State last year. A solid cornerback, and Christian Roland Wallace comes over from Arizona. So they do have added talent, and they're stronger defensively, and that's going to be the key. Defensively, I should say, and that's going to be the key. But they've got Caleb Williams back. They've got a veteran offensive line. They've got dangerous receivers and running backs. So to me, they're very capable of getting there. I remember last year they almost made the playoff. Had they beaten Utah in the Pac-12 title game, I remember Caleb Williams got banged up early, took 6 sacks in that game because he was banged up, wasn't quite the same. Then they would have made the playoff last year. So I give him a shot. I didn't put him in my top 4 because of those 2 tough road tests, but I think they clearly are a national title contender.
Phil Steele joining us. Phil Steele's college football preview out, philsteele.com. You can get your hands on it and get ready for the season. One more out of the Pac-12 before we switch it around a little bit. Colorado. I've contended for a while that there may not, at least in the beginning of the season, be a more interesting team, a more watched team than what Prime can do at Colorado. How good could they be? Just by talent. It's been chaotic there. I get it. But, you know, how competitive is that team going to be, do you think, this year?
In Vegas right now, the over-under win total is 3.5 for them. And I would probably go and lean with the under. Now, there has been a massive talent upgrade, Jacob. But here's the thing. A lot of these guys joined after spring practice, so they weren't even in for spring. In fact, if you watch the spring game, you'll see like 4 or 5 of the stars of the spring game. They're gone now. And so all these players are going to have to come in August 1st. Let's say that's when they come in at Colorado, and in 1 month become a team somehow. Now, there's no doubt if you go position by position, this team has more athletic talent than what they had last year, and in some positions by a lot. I just think it's going to be tough to make them into a team, and throw in the fact they're playing in the Pac-12. Their non-conference games are at TCU, Nebraska, which is loaded this year. So it's a very tough schedule to go on top of it. So I think it's going to be a rebuilding year for Colorado. But I mean, who knows? Maybe Deion surprises this year.
Let's jump over to the Big 12. I'm here in the state of Kansas, so we cover things extensively there. Interesting in the polls, preseason media polls, Texas is put on top. First time in a very long time they've been put there. Are you with that as much as Kansas State has returned to put Texas at the number 1 spot in the Big 12?
Yeah, and I tell you what, if you're in Kansas, Jacob, how different is it not seeing Kansas pick last in the Big 12 this year?
13 years.
I told Coach Leipold, I said, Coach, I'm a little mad at you. I mean, it used to be easy for me. I would just put Kansas last and then worry about the other 9 teams or 10 or 11, whatever teams are in the Big 12. And he said he's not going to apologize for that. Great job he did. But, yes, I do have Texas as the best team in the Big 12 this year. I think if you look at my position rankings in the front of the magazine, they come in with my number 14 set of quarterbacks. In fact, all their units rank in my top 25, and they're including special teams, which is number 3. They've got a player in Jalen Ford at linebacker who probably should have been the Big 12 Defensive Player of the Year last year. Offensively, Quinn Ewers is back. They are loaded at receiver. The offensive line returns intact. They are the most talented team. Now, I'll say this. They're the only team in the Big 12 that has to play each. If you look at the top 6 teams, they're the only one that has to play each of the other 5 of the top 6 teams. So a tough schedule for Texas. Everybody's going to be gunning for them, but they do have the talent to get there this year.
Pick 2 in that preseason poll is Kansas State, the defending champion. They won the Big 12 championship game a year ago. They return a quarterback in Will Howard, who I think if he continues what he did last year, is probably climbing into NFL, radars, which is a remarkable story if you saw how the first couple of years of his career went. But what about him and the Wildcats? They sent 4 guys to the NFL, which is a lot to overcome for a school like Kansas State. But they do return the entire offensive line. They do return a quarterback who I think, could become a real hot NFL commodity based on his size and skill set if he repeats last year's performance.
I agree with you, Jacob. I mean, he is 6'5", 248 pounds, and probably Coach Kleiman called him the most improved player in college football last year, and I agree with him. He's a big kid. He throws it well. He understands the system, and he's the ultimate leader. Now, the big question is who's going to replace Deuce Vaughn. But I like Treshaun Ward. I like DJ Giddens. So I think they're actually a little bit deeper at the running back core than they were last year. You look at the receiving core, probably my biggest question would be the receivers. They do lose 3 of the top 5 guys from last year. They have Phillip Brooks back. They've got Sanat back at the tight end spot, and defensively they're always going to be good. Now, the one thing I don't like about K-State is the schedule. They avoid 3 of the bottom teams of the Big 12, and they also avoid Oklahoma. And I say that because Kleiman's 3-1 against Oklahoma. So you look at the remaining schedule that they have, they'll probably be an underdog when they play Texas on the road, maybe against Oklahoma State on the road, but they're a clear-cut contender in the Big 12. I think Oklahoma draws the easier schedule of the 2 teams, avoiding Kansas State like they do. And, in Vegas right now, Jacob, Oklahoma is actually favored in 11 of their 12 games, and this for a team that was just 6-7 last season.
That's where I was headed next. Phil Steele joining us. It's wild. Brent Venables is, high pedigree guy. It was a disaster in year 1. In year 2 now, everybody seems to be in on the Sooners. Does that surprise you at all?
It does that everybody's in on them, but not if you go peel away the layers. I mean, you go look at their blowout games last year, like TCU and Texas. Gabriel got injured. They were running the Wildcat with the backup quarterback at times. This year, they're better at the backup quarterback position with Jackson Arnold, my number 5 rated quarterback out of high school. Gabriel's back. The offensive line is, they got Bill Bedenbaugh back at the offensive line coach. He's got a veteran unit. And going over the team with Coach Venables, I mean, aggravating, frustrating. Not going to happen again. That's the defense from last year. 461 yards per game, 30 points per game. Now, he runs a complex defense, and maybe if he made one mistake last year, it was throwing that entire defense at that team brand new. Now it's his second year in the system. He's brought in a bunch of transfers. In fact, I project 4 or 5 transfers to be starters at the beginning of the year. So they've upgraded the talent. It's a second year in the system. And then, like I said, the schedule lays out really well. Road games are against Cincinnati, Kansas, Oklahoma State, and BYU, all fall in the winnable category. That means the toughest games, your TCU, your UCF, Iowa State, they're all at home, but they avoid many of the big boys this year. I think they've got a great schedule, and like I said, Vegas has them favored in 11 of their 12 games.
UCF, Cincinnati, BYU, and Houston all join the league. Any chance that any of those teams make any noise at all? I know UCF is projected the highest, but are you in on any of them to be a factor this year?
Yeah, of the 4, the only one I think that can be a factor is UCF. And I do think they have a chance. Going over the squad with Coach Malzahn, he feels that they've been preparing for this move for the Big 12 for 2 years. Remember, he's a guy that's coached in the SEC, so it's not like this is coming out of the blue for him. John Rice Plumlee is the QB, and he brought in Timmy McClain from South Florida as the backup. But remember, there was a difference when Plumlee got injured last year, and maybe at times they wouldn't run him as much because they didn't want to get him injured. I don't think they have that problem this year with McLean as the backup. It is a veteran squad. They've got 15 returning starters coming back. They are number 9 on my experience chart, and they might have been the most talented team in the American Conference last year. Plumlee got injured late, and that's why they lost that AAC title game last year. They had beaten Tulane on the road, as you recall. But when you look at the schedule, they'll probably be an underdog at Kansas State, at Oklahoma, and at Texas Tech. There's a couple of toss-up games on the schedule. I think it will be a step up in level of competition, but of the 4, to me, clearly the best one is UCF.
Phil Steele, Phil Steele's college football preview available, philsteele.com, joining us here on CBS Sports Radio. A couple more for you, Phil. As I look at Vegas odds now, Georgia has been and is a pretty overwhelming favorite here, plus 220 lately. Alabama, the next closest, at least at the list I'm looking at over at BetMGM, at plus 600. Does Georgia feel like that much of a favorite to you? 3 times essentially better than Alabama at that, from a betting perspective?
Probably in this case better than Alabama. I would say yes. It's dangerous to go against Nick Saban when he's not preseason number 1. However, they only have 5 starters back on offense, 5 on defense. They don't even know who their quarterback's going to be right now. And they do have some tough games on the schedule, like Texas, LSU, both at home, Tennessee at home, and they have to play Texas A&M on the road. So it's not an easy schedule, but never doubt Nick Saban in this case. However, Georgia has a much easier schedule and a more talented and experienced team, I think, especially when you look at them defensively. Last year, remember, they lost all those first-round draft picks, probably 8 or 9 draft picks overall. This year, they only lost 5. They're actually more experienced defensively than last year. Offensively, they got the best offensive line in the country, my number 4 set of receivers, number 6 running backs. Their question is quarterback. However, unlike Alabama, Carson Beck has been in the system for 4 years, so he's got playing time. He's got a great supporting cast, and when you look at Georgia's schedule, they're going to be a double-digit favorite in their first 10 games. Now, the only game they might not be a double-digit favorite is at Tennessee, but by that time, Carson Beck's got 10 starts under his belt. He'll be a veteran quarterback. So I think Georgia clearly has the better path and are the more experienced team than Alabama, so probably deserve to be that spread-wise, although betting on a team to be the first 3-peat national champion since the 1930s, it's not a big price there at plus 200.
Yeah, I think I'm with you, especially with the transfer portal. I do think that throws a wrench into it. So if we are looking at this, outside of the traditional favorites here, who do you think that team is that, nationwide that could sneak in based on what they've done in the offseason or are returning, that, who's last year's TCU, I suppose, essentially, that sort of sneaks up on everybody?
Yeah, if you're looking for last year's TCU, I'll circle one team with that possibility this year, and that's Wisconsin. And I'll be honest with you, Jacob, when I started the magazine process, I do it in a 3 write-through process. The first write-through is a postseason write-through. The second one is a pre-spring. And then the third one is after I talk to the head coaches. And after the first write-through, I'm like, you know what? Wisconsin wins in November because of the run game. They run the football with their running backs, that big offensive line, and that's when they win games. Now they're switching to a pass offense and Phil Longo and more of the air raid concept. They bring in SMU's starting quarterback and Tanner Mordecai. How's that going to work at Wisconsin? But after going over the squad with Coach Fickell, they are not going to make a drastic change. In fact, he feels like with the pass offense, they'll open up more holes, whereas teams could stack the box in the past on Braylon Allen, Ches Maluzzi. They won't be able to do so, and he feels they'll be even more productive runners. And Coach Fickell had some very productive running backs when he was at Cincinnati. They've got the big offensive line. Now they have the pass game on offense, so I like that. Defensively, last year they only had 3 starters back. This year they got 8, so they will have one of the better defenses in the country. They go from number 107 on my experience chart all the way up to number 20. And then look at their schedule this year. The road games are against Washington State, Purdue, Illinois, Indiana, and Minnesota. I call all 5 of those games winnable. The toughest 2 games, Iowa at home, and they get them at home, and Ohio State at home. And guess what? They get Ohio State the week after they play Penn State. So I can make a case for Wisconsin being 11-1 or 12-0 and being in that Big 12 title game. And if they win the Big 12 title game, guess what? They're in the playoff like TCU did last year. They were just 7-6 last year. Luke Fickell took a group of 5 team to the playoff. He actually has more talent with this Wisconsin team than that Cincinnati team had.
That's interesting. 60-1 right now in Vegas on Wisconsin. Okay, Phil,
it'd be worth a shekel or two.
Why not? Why not? Just throw darts a little bit. Maybe Georgia falters. Okay, Phil, well, we really appreciate it. Before we let you go, let's tell people how to get their hands on that magazine. PhilSteele.com, we know, or still available. Hard copy, you can go into a store and get it.
I appreciate that, Jacob. And unlike past years where it's been available everywhere, this year it's exclusively at Barnes & Noble and Books A Million. So if you're out and about, save your gas, only go to Barnes & Noble or Books A Million, or you could go to PhilSteele.com. And when you go to PhilSteele.com, we're going to charge you a shipping charge for the magazine. It costs money to ship things. However, we'll give you the digital magazine for free along with the hard copy. And we actually update the digital magazine all the way through September. For example, if you go to the digital magazine now and you look at the Northwestern head coach, it's not Pat Fitzgerald. We've got the coaching updated already, and we keep updating it all the way through September. So Barnes & Noble, Books A Million, or PhilSteele.com, where you get the hard copy and the digital.
Phil, we appreciate you making some time for us here on CBS Sports Radio. A lot of fun there. You can always go back and listen to that if you joined us halfway through for free on the Odyssey app.
All right, that's Phil Steele. We're back here live, coming to us Thursday. Appreciate Phil for making the time there to do that. Great overarching landscape, and I wouldn't have thought about Wisconsin. So cool stuff there, and good thoughts on the Big 12 as well. All right, that's it for that segment. You can go back again and listen to it for free on the Odyssey app. We'll come back. Tommy and I will talk a little Major League Baseball. Interesting weekend for the Royals. We'll tell you why as we make our way through this Monday edition of Sports Daily.
Let's do this thing. Go!
Sports Daily is on KFH.
All right, welcome back in, everybody. Sports Daily on KFH. A couple of things I think to take away on the Royals. Since mid-June, which is 9 appearances, Scott Barlow has allowed runs just twice in those 9 appearances, once in his last 5. He seems to be, Tommy, getting back on track to some degree for the Royals. So, that's good news. That as far as the trade deadline is probably the most important thing that's going to happen for Kansas City, is that Scott Barlow pitches well up to the deadline, and maybe any other reliever does as well. So that's good news, I think, to take away from the Royals, as he was effective against the Rays again last night. A solid inning, a very clean inning, no hits, no walks, made it through, 3 outs. Here we go.
Sorry about that. Yeah, I certainly have always believed that Scott Barlow can be a really valuable piece for a bullpen, especially for a contender. And the more appearances that he goes out and he's able to keep things clean, I think it shows on a team like the Royals that have such a hard time in general with clean innings, whether you're talking about starters or relievers. That just shows, Scott Barlow can make it happen not only on a bad team, but he can make it happen on a contender as well. So I'm with you. I think that the more that he is able to continue to, pitch well, the Royals continue to give him the ball, it's going to make him appealing to a handful of teams that are going to need his services down the stretch.
And don't sleep on Carlos Hernandez, who has 52 strikeouts in 45 innings and a 1 basically whip, which is walks or hits in an inning. I mean, he's as good as anybody on this team. So Carlos Hernandez may be a sneaky name too. So Hernandez and Barlow, I think, will be the 2 guys to pay attention to, at the deadline. Bobby Witt Jr., Tommy, who some thought the Royals maybe should trade now. I mean, I don't know if it's better or worse. I think they'd be crazy, which I've made very abundantly clear. And the bust talk we've heard early in the year, I thought was just absolutely outrageous. But over essentially the last month of the season, Bobby Witt Jr. is hitting .310. His slugging percentage is up just under 600. He has 5 home runs, 16 RBIs for a really bad team, right? He's got 20 strikeouts to 6 walks, which is not great, but he's been worse in that category. 6 steals. Bobby Witt Jr. is heating up, Tommy. And really, if you looked across the landscape of baseball, and has been probably a top 15 to 20 offensive player, just offense, over the last basically month of the season, Bobby Witt Jr. is just fine. I think his development's right on track. He was very unlucky early in the year. I think some of that is leveling out now. And there are still things he needs to work on. He needs to walk more. He needs to strike out less, and he needs to be on base so he can take advantage of that speed. But it's coming for this young player, and I think he's going to be great. I think he's going to be a superstar, a perennial all-star, and the Royals just need to chill and hang on to him.
Yeah, the second inning of the game against the Rays yesterday, Bobby Witt Jr. was a big part of. He wasn't the only one. I mean, it really the bats were working for Kansas City early in the game. And as I watched that start of the game, I thought, okay, this is what we've been waiting for, not only from Bobby Witt Jr., but from this offense in general, an offense that has been much maligned throughout the season, and, really hard to find glimpses of hope outside of Bobby Witt Jr., basically. And so, knowing that he is coming around, I know that the term sophomore slump has been tossed around quite a bit with Bobby Witt Jr. I just think that, and I don't know if I'm willing to say, and I think the stats would back up, that it's not a slump. It's just been a little bit of a delayed growth, or not even really growth, but delayed ascension, I guess, with the stardom that Bobby Witt Jr. has. But it's starting to come around, and I think that the longer he's able to get on base, the more he's able to get on base, steal some bases, that speed will just fuel more for him. And so I like where that's going, and I think that will continue.
It's crazy to me again. Like even the thought right now of trading Bobby Witt Jr. Like I just still can't make any sense of it whatsoever. Like what? Because at some point, like it's like, what if you get this massive prospect package? Yeah, but so what? Like you have the guy, the young player right now. Like you could get a massive prospect package and get lucky if one of those players comes back. It'd be different if he was, nearing a point of free agency and the inevitable was you can't re-sign him and all that stuff. Like if I'm the Royals right now and I want to, make the fans feel good about something, I take the track record that that they took, quite frankly, with Salvador Perez a long time ago, that the Braves take, that the Rays take sometimes. I go find a way to lock up Bobby Witt Jr. and commit something and say, all right, fans, look, we're committing some actual dollars to make sure Bobby Witt Jr. is here, productive, doing all that. Like if you want to have a long-term discussion about Bobby Witt Jr., buy out his arbitration years and see if you can't get 1 to 2 years of free agency out of that. That's what I'd be doing if I were the Royals. But the thought of trading him right now makes absolutely no sense. Never has. Certainly doesn't as he plays better. Certainly won't as I think he becomes an all-star every year and one of the top young players in this league.
Yeah, and I think that the more that I've thought about the potential of Bobby Witt Jr. potentially being traded, I understand the thought process if the Royals were to make that move. I don't think that they will. I think it's unlikely that that happens. I understand why, but I don't think that for the long-term future of the franchise, that would be a direction that I would go. I think I've shifted on that a little bit because at one time, it wasn't that long ago. I mean, a couple of weeks ago, I was saying blow the whole thing up, get rid of everybody, get a whole big trade package back for Bobby Witt Jr. and start to rebuild this thing from the ground up. That being said, and I think that some of it has come from the way that Bobby Witt Jr. has played the last couple of weeks, where I thought, okay, like you can build a team around that. You can build a team that can be successful around the talent of Bobby Witt Jr. So hold on to him. I'm with you. I think that you have to do one thing or the other. You either trade him away and get a haul in return, and I don't think that's the right move, or you lock him up long term. I don't think you can play this middle game where you're just, you're going to go year after year of arbitration. And then, when arbitration happens, a lot of times you get hard feelings between the players and their representatives and the team. I think that you've got to commit one way or another. You've got to commit to moving him out and having a fresh rebuild, or you've got to commit to having him be the cornerstone of your franchise for a long time.
Yeah, just commit. It's fine. The other cornerstone, Salvador Perez forever, apparently hurt his hamstring, legging out something. Salvador Perez is not having the year that you trade him on, quite frankly. That also wouldn't make a whole lot of sense. Like it'd be one thing if Salvador Perez was having a year like you had a couple years ago and you had to make the tough call. You're not going to get anything for Salvador Perez right now, like realistically, unless you ate all the money. But like this isn't the year to trade him either because he's not, like, his production's dipped a little bit this year. And maybe that's a long-term trend. I don't know. It's just fine for the Royals. I'll say that. He's still one of the best hitters on this team. But now if he's hurt, I think that's dead on arrival too. And the Royals have said as much, like they don't have any intention of trading Salvador Perez, but let's be real. That's honestly as much about they ain't going to get anything for him as it is they don't want to trade him, which is just fine with me because I'd like to see him stay a Royal forever.
As soon as I saw that he was removed from the game with that hamstring tightness and was considered day-to-day, my first thought was, well, that's one way to ensure you're not going to get traded, is to get injured. And the play that he was injured on, that was a pure hustle play. He was scoring from first and hustling around the bases, and you'll love to see that. He looked like he was in some pain as he was crouching down behind the plate. And so they removed him from the lineup, and hopefully it's nothing severe, because this team, we've seen what it's been like when Salvador Perez is on the shelf. And, even regardless of the stats on the field and whether or not he's having a year that would result in him having a good return in being traded, regardless of all of that, you want Salvy's presence there in the clubhouse. And so hopefully this injury is nothing severe. It's a day-to-day thing. You cross our fingers and hope he's okay.
Yeah, I think he will be. I think long-term, he's still got plenty left in the tank. I think he's going to be a Hall of Famer, and I'd just as well see him do it all in Kansas City. So those two names, I think, are going to be off the table. I don't think Bobby Wood Jr. was ever going to be on the table anyway. I don't even know why. Like if the company line is, anybody's available in the right deal, no, they're not. Like the company line needs to be, we're not trading Bobby Wood Jr. Like he's the, future of our franchise. We would never do that. That needs to be the company line. Salvador Perez, probably a little bit different, but look, if they're easily the two most interesting players on the team, along with Vinny Pasquantino, who's out for the year. So it's fine. Like those three players can be a part of whatever the future looks like. But a couple relievers pitching it pretty well lately might be the interesting names, I think, to watch as we get closer to the trade deadline with the Kansas City Royals. Let's take a quick break. We'll come back. Sports Daily, we're just cruising through this Monday. No problems here. 869-1240. The IHOP hotline is open. Let's give away some Wind Surge tickets, shall we? On the way out, you can go see the Surge on us. Call in for a 4-pack of vouchers, which are good. You pick the date to get the tickets. These vouchers work anytime. A 4-pack to see a Wind Surge game of your choice, courtesy of us here at Sports Daily and KFH. We'll do that to the first caller as we make our way out of this segment on the IHOP hotline. We'll come back. We'll tell you who the winner is and get a little more Sports Daily here in on a Monday. Welcome back, everybody. It is Sports Daily. Monty headed to the Wind Surge. Congratulations, Monty, for winning those. Courtesy of us here at Sports Daily. I'm Jacob Albracht alongside Tommy Castor, Jad Chambers producing for us here. Aaron Rodgers is whining about Hard Knocks. Tommy, let's not make this the beginning of excuses, please. Yeah, it's annoying that they're there, but who cares? Just ignore them. Never watch the show. You'll never even know what you said. Whatever. I mean, the NFL needed to make it happen with the Jets. It was the most obvious choice for about 1,000 different reasons. But Aaron Rodgers is the reason. But let's not start this excuse making now. We have to just deal with it. Oh, it's gonna be such a pain. And week 1, if I suck, it'll be because Hard Knocks got in my way. That's kind of the vibe I'm getting on this whining about Hard Knocks. Everybody has to deal with it, man. Just deal with it. Come on, who cares?
I don't know why he's so upset about it. He likes being in the spotlight. He always has been.
No,
so I don't understand. Other than just if it's fake, crying and whining. But I mean, Aaron Rodgers, probably more than any other quarterback in the NFL, loves being front and center. And so I don't know. I don't get the issue. I don't get why he's complaining. It kind of sounds like he's trying to preemptively make some excuses if things don't particularly go well. But I mean, we know how compelling this is going to be because he's in a new system and he's dealing with new people, and we're going to see him be frustrated and annoyed. And I mean, all those things. That's why the NFL chose the Jets to be on Hard Knocks this season. And that's really the doing of Aaron Rodgers.
Sure it is. Just deal with it. Aaron, let's go. You'll be fine. You've made for an interesting situation. It's of your own doing, right?
Yep.
Another NFL headline that I've seen today here is Tyreek Hill saying that, he thinks and predicts a 2,000-yard receiving year. And then the Dolphins to win the Super Bowl, which, of course, he needs to predict that. But a 2,000-yard receiving year. Tyreek Hill was great. He was fantastic last year with the Dolphins in his first year there. He had 1,700 yards, and Tua was hurt a lot of the season. Any chance, Tommy, you think that Tyreek Hill could challenge 2,000 receiving yards in a season?
No, I don't think so. I mean, because I mean, who's going to be the quarterback the entire season? Can Tua finish an entire season? I don't know about that. And, this is something that has never happened before in the history of the NFL. If Tyreek Hill couldn't get 2,000 receiving yards with Patrick Mahomes throwing him the football, he's not getting 2,000 receiving yards with Tua Tagovailoa throwing him the football. I mean, it goes Calvin Johnson and then Cooper Kupp. And I don't see Tyreek Hill this season coming anywhere close to 2,000 receiving yards.
I think it's possible. I do think it's possible. I think their offense is designed that way. It does.
You think Tua Tagovailoa can connect with Tyreek Hill?
That's what it depends on.
Calvin,
Calvin Johnson had 1964. Cooper Kupp had 1947. Julio Jones had an 1,800-yard year, and there's an extra game in the season this year. Let's not forget. I think it's possible because I think you could, Tyreek Hill. The reason I think it's possible for him is because of the chunk plays, right? You may not have the consistency maybe that Kupp or Johnson had, but he could easily have 2-3 games within a season where he has 200 yards in each game because of his chunk play ability. The Dolphins clearly want to do that. The Dolphins don't have a run game. It wasn't going to happen with Mahomes because Kelsey's there and, they're designed to spread the ball around more. The Dolphins have...
But he was getting chunk plays in Kansas City too.
Right, but he wasn't getting 119 receptions in Kansas City. You know what I mean? That's the difference. His high... Oh, he had 111 his last year in Kansas City, when they had to dink and dunk it, Tommy. But before that, 61, 75, 87, 58, and 87 catches. That's the difference, is that he had 120 receptions basically last year. That's where I think they will emphasize him enough. Kansas City was they're never going to have a receiver that does that, has 120 catches in a year. They spread it around too much. But if the Dolphins, even if they just match 120 receptions in a year, if if 4 to 5 of those become chunk break-off plays, now he's challenging the record. I do think it's possible. I don't think it's likely because it's never happened before, but I think it's within the realm of possibilities that it could happen.
I think it's less about Tyreek Hill and more about the durability of his starting quarterback.
Yep.
Because, I mean, remember, how many more receptions could have Tyreek Hill had a season ago if it had been Tua the entire year? Remember, Tua was out and it was Teddy Bridgewater and then it was Skylar Thompson. And, so I don't know. I guess if Tua can finish an entire year and stay healthy, then I would be a little bit more likely to say it would be in the realm of possibility. But there's really nothing telling me that Tua can stay healthy because he really never has. So I don't know. I'm not willing to say that I think it's even likely or possible at this point.
Young career Tua, outside of his rookie year, which was real weird, right? He had 12 starts and then 13 starts. So he missed, a handful of games in both of those seasons. So I agree with you. What's really interesting about Tyreek Hill to me is he's 29. Like, he's entering that phase where he should be slowing down. And boy, he just doesn't feel like he is. And that'll be interesting for his career. He's going to be a Hall of Famer, I think. But like, does he slow down or can he maintain the speed aspect of his game? Which has never been in question, right? It's more about like what I think shocked us all in his time in Kansas City was how good a receiver he became, how good a catcher of the football he became, right? And if the speed hangs, interesting. Dolphins' chances to win a Super Bowl. The other part of his prediction. Here's a question I asked. Like, if you took the AFC top teams, Tommy. So if you take Kansas City, Buffalo, and Cincinnati are obviously the three favorites. But what about the other group? So if you took that other group of teams, which I would contend off the top of my head, I don't have the list in front of me, it probably includes the Chargers, the Jets, the Dolphins, the Ravens, at least those teams. And maybe you could put the Jags and the Browns in there. But put those teams in the NFC, and they're no worse than the third best team in the NFC.
Yeah.
Like, I might even put some of them ahead of San Francisco. Yeah. That's the difference in the league. So what is that? No better than the fourth best team in the AFC would be that high in the NFC.
Yeah, it just shows you that disparity between the two conferences. I mean, really, it's the Eagles and bust, right? I mean, the Eagles, the Niners, maybe the Cowboys. But really, other than that, that's basically it in the NFC. I guess you could throw the Vikings up there, but people are low on the Vikings. They're down on the Vikings. So I don't know.
Jordan Addison, if Jordan Addison's really good, and I know people loved him as he comes in, don't sleep on the Vikings, especially in the NFC. Like, they're going to have a lot of firepower throwing the football. I think that, and so the reason I'd say the Dolphins may be a puncher's chance, if the Dolphins were the NFC, they'd have a decent chance to make the Super Bowl. So if they're good enough to do that, who knows if they can just get to the playoffs, what's possible. Interesting for Tyreek Hill there as he makes his way through, and we'll see if he can back it up. 2,000 yards, not likely, of course, because, again, we've never seen it before. But I think with the 17th game, he's as good a candidate to do it as we have. I think, Justin Jefferson, and that's with Jalen Waddle there too, by the way. Justin Jefferson probably has a shot at some point. I think Jamar Chase later in his career probably has a shot at it. There are several receivers that you look at and you're like, maybe. Like, I might be able to get it done. It's a receiver-rich era in the NFL. There is no doubt about that. Man, I'm ready for training camp. Aren't the Jets involved in the Hall of Fame game too? Like, not only did they get Hard Knocks, but don't they? I think so. I think it's like the Jets and the Browns or something. I think the Jets may report tomorrow. They'll all be
the
in
Jets
camp
and the
by
Browns.
The end of the week, though.
Jets and the Browns.
So yeah, they report. So you not only that, but you get the Hall of Fame game portion of this to deal with. Man, poor Aaron Rodgers. Poor guy. 869-1240 is the number to call. We'll be right back.
Toppers Plus Truck Accessories has moved to a new location at 333.
All right, everybody, thanks for tuning in to us here today. Congratulations to our winner of the Win Surge vouchers. Congratulations to the winner of our free iced tea cards from HTO. Coming up today on the network, Jim Rome at 11, Bob and Jeff here locally 2 to 4. Regular programming until 7 o'clock. Royals, Tigers. We'll see if Bobby Witt Jr. can stay hot. Starting to give me more appeal to this season, certainly. And if that bullpen can keep logging some innings there and potentially get some players traded at the deadline. All right, for Jad Chambers producing and Tommy Castor, I'm Jacob Albracht. We'll be back Tuesday. Lots to go this week. Busy week here on Sports Daily.